Jagged peaks tore the sky apart like blackened teeth, serrated ridges scraping the twin suns as their dim light glanced off jagged spires. Acidic winds swept down the cliffs, carrying the cries of predators, the tang of sulfur, and the metallic scent of torn rock. The Xylan moved among these spires like ghosts of stone, their sinewy forms blending into the cliffs, eyes scanning every shadow. Centuries of survival had honed them into perfection, creatures born to thrive where lesser beings would perish. Their cities clung to the cliffs with the precision of a predator stalking prey, bone-white spires fused with steel reinforcements, bridges hanging across chasms so deep that light from the twin suns barely reached the bottom. Lightning split the sky with terrifying precision, illuminating patrols gliding along narrow ledges, every motion an echo of the planet's relentless demands. Even their rituals, the coordinated movements, the silent salutes, the ceremonial hunts, were extensions of survival itself, a test of precision and endurance. Yet even in their perfection, unease flickered. Across the void, fragmented signals told of beings who endured impossible worlds, species that survived radiation storms, acid downpours, pressures that would crush Xylan bone. At first, elders dismissed them as myth, shadows spun into legend. But whispers lingered. Perhaps they exist, a scout murmured, voice trembling with equal parts fear and awe. The notion unsettled Xylan pride, planting seeds of doubt among the otherwise unshakable apex warriors. They observed their world with reverence and caution, moving with lethal grace through jagged terrain that had claimed countless predecessors. A predator leaped from the mist, jaws snapping, and a Xylan hunter flicked a blade-like appendage, slicing with surgical precision. The kill was immediate, clean. Every Xylan act reaffirmed the apex hierarchy, and yet the legend of these other beings, creatures that might rival or surpass them, hung like a shadow across the sky. The alien POV lingered on this tension, capturing awe of their own mastery while hinting at vulnerability. In the crimson dusk, bioluminescent flora glowed faintly across the cliffs, painting silhouettes of warriors in eerie light. The wind carried distant cries, predators, the storms, and perhaps something beyond perception. And then, far above the horizon, a faint glimmer appeared, a streak of light so small and improbable that it seemed insignificant. The Xylan paused, instinctively alert, their perfect world suddenly untested. That streak, tiny, chaotic, alive, would soon unravel assumptions they had long held sacred. From the spires, elders recorded every moment, debating whether this was a natural phenomenon or a herald of something far greater. "Our apex is not absolute," one whispered, the words almost lost in the wind. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure, and it lingered, shaping the Xylan's perception of what was possible. The sun set, bleeding orange and red across jagged cliffs, casting long, trembling shadows. Predators stalked, storms gathered, and the Xylan, masters of their domain, felt the first tremor of fear and curiosity intertwined. Somewhere in the universe, a being, or beings, approached that would challenge everything they knew about survival. And the Xylan, proud, precise, and lethal, were not yet ready for what was coming. The nebula twisted and roiled like a living entity, clouds of ionized gas glowing in violent arcs of green and violet, carrying storms that seemed to scream through space. The Xylan scouts drifted through its edge, sensors humming as they probed every shadow, every distortion. They had mapped Deathworlds before, planets that crushed the unwary, beasts that shredded invaders, storms that burned cities to ash, but nothing in the archives prepared them for this. It appeared first as a flicker, a small, ragged shape slicing through plasma clouds. Then sensors locked on, a vessel of crude, chaotic construction, hull plates jarring at angles no Xylan designer would approve. Sparks hissed along its surfaces, and its engines spat fire in uneven bursts. Yet it did not falter. It moved with a rhythm that mocked the laws of physics, a dance of reckless precision through a storm that would have shredded any Xylan scout. From their elevated sensors, the Xylan observed the humans inside. Tiny forms hunched over panels, hands moving with astonishing speed, bodies exposed to radiation bursts, gravity distortions, and the violent magnetic eddies that twisted metal like paper. The humans adjusted shields, rerouted energy, improvised engine boosts, and twisted their trajectory with timing that made the scouts' processors whine in alarm. Chaos seemed to obey them, bending around their will, yet no signal indicated fear, only focus. The scouts transmitted frantically back to the council. "They should not survive," one whispered, almost audibly. "Every law we know, every principle of physics, they violate." The elders, watching from spire-mounted holoscreens, leaned forward, a ripple of unease passing through their ranks. No Xylan had ever moved through a nebula like this. No Xylan had ever endured such extremes without shielding and preparation measured in decades. Yet the humans improvised in real time, every maneuver unpredictable, yet astonishingly effective. A magnetic storm erupted, twisting the vessel violently, displacing entire fields of ionized gas in a chaotic spiral. The hull buckled under stress, yet humans rerouted power, stabilizing engines with precision that defied prediction. Sparks arced over consoles inside the cockpit, flames licking at the edges of panels, but they worked without hesitation, pushing the vessel forward with determination that seemed almost alive. One scout focused on environmental data, radiation spikes, gravity wells, plasma surges, and turbulence levels that would vaporize Xylan flesh or crush their skeletons.
And yet, every spike was met with adaptation. Humans extended sensors, recalibrated shields, even jettisoned parts of their own hull to prevent catastrophic failure. The alien observers alternated between fascination and horror. This was not survival. It was survival rewritten, reshaped, remastered into a form that the Xylan could not anticipate. Cinematic snapshots filled the view screens, the ship twisting along the edge of a gravitational whirlpool, flames dancing across the hull. A burst of plasma tore through the nebula, and humans adjusted trajectory mid-spin, landing on a narrow corridor of ionized gas that should have been a death sentence. Sensors picked up their bodies' reactions, rapid calculations, instant improvisation, almost intuitive coordination that no algorithm could model. The elders murmured in unison, the weight of realization pressing down. Apex status was not immutable. Their pride, built over millennia, trembled in the face of these fragile, chaotic beings. For the first time, a possibility emerged that terrified them. These humans might not only survive the impossible, they might redefine it. Another storm approached, flaring red and gold against the nebula's swirling violet haze. The vessel shuddered, sparks erupting along hull joints, but humans did not retreat. Instead, they adjusted shields in real time, stabilized engines, and dove into the core of the plasma storm, bending the chaos into a pathway. The Xylan watched, riveted, as calculations failed, expectations shattered, and every instinct of survival and dominance was challenged. Minutes stretched into eternity. Every observer, every scout, every council member felt the weight of something unprecedented. The humans were fragile. They bled easily, they could be crushed, they could be destroyed, but they persisted. The laws of the cosmos, which had ruled without question for eons, seemed suddenly negotiable, malleable, and the humans' will shaped them. And then, in a fleeting moment, the vessel disappeared behind a massive ion flare, swallowed by the nebula. Silence descended over the Xylan observation posts. For hours, no signals returned. Anxiety gnawed at even the most disciplined warriors. And then, the faintest blip, a flicker of life, of presence, of triumph, appeared again, emerging from the heart of the storm, intact, unbroken. One scout finally whispered, almost in disbelief, "They survived what should have ended them." A wave of quiet passed through the council chambers, an unspoken acknowledgement that the galaxy had changed. These creatures were not merely anomalies, they were variables beyond prediction. The universe itself had tilted in their favor, and the Xylan, proud apex predators of a death world, felt an unfamiliar tremor in the hierarchy they had always assumed unbreakable. Somewhere beyond the nebula, the humans pressed onward, unaware of the alarm they had ignited across a species that had never known fear beyond instinct.
The Xylan observed, calculating, recording, and slowly realizing that the galaxy's apex might have a new contender. And above the storm, in the distant, burning clouds of plasma, one unspoken question crystallized in the minds of the Xylan. If these fragile beings could survive this, what else could they endure? The humans descended onto the Xylan homeworld as if walking into the maw of inevitability. Their ship's thrusters screamed against winds laced with acidic droplets, the hull rattling under the planet's brutal turbulence. Every observer atop the jagged spires held their breath. The Xylan had never seen a species step willingly into a world engineered to annihilate the weak. Acid rain pelted their bodies, stinging skin and corroding synthetic fibers. Lightning cleaved the skies in violent arcs, illuminating cliffs crumbling beneath tremors that would swallow any other species whole. Predators leapt from fissures, jaws snapping with terrifying precision, eyes glowing in the blood-red mist. The Xylan expected hesitation, panic, inevitable failure. What they witnessed instead was a ballet of survival unlike any chronicled in millennia of observation. Humans moved with coordination that appeared instinctive yet calculated, improvising with tools, environmental features, and sheer audacity. One climbed a cliff slick with acid, binding rope improvised from torn hull cables to jagged rock, then extended a hand to another to haul them upward. Another redirected a small river of molten rock, channeling it into a makeshift barrier that dissuaded predators from attacking. Every act of survival was also an act of invention, blending brute will with ingenuity. The Xylan POV fixated on the storm itself. The winds screamed through the jagged cliffs, whipping dust and corrosive rain into faces, rattling bones and steel alike. Thunder boomed like the planet's own heartbeat, shaking stone spires to their core. Yet humans pressed forward, shields flickering, boots slipping on wet rock, faces grim, bodies battered, but unbroken. Their movements were audacious, coordinated, almost ritualistic, a defiance of both environment and expectation. Predators emerged in waves, drawn to the movement, to the scent of life unshielded. One enormous creature, all sinew and obsidian scales, leapt from the shadows, jaws opening wide, ready to snap a human in two. Instead, they ducked, rolled, and countered with a tool fashioned from molten rock hardened against the acidic rain. Another human tripped a trap, collapsing a boulder that crushed the predator's advance. The Xylan recorded every motion, their calculations failing, their pride challenged. How could such fragile creatures survive this world, and survive with precision, coordination, and creativity? The environment itself became a trial. Cliff faces collapsed unexpectedly, sending cascades of stone and molten streams rushing downward. Acid rain corroded every surface it touched. Electrical storms tore through the terrain, arcs of lightning cracking into molten rivers, sending up steam that stung exposed flesh. Humans endured burns, bruises, and exhaustion, improvising with every movement. One wrenched a broken hull plate from their ship and fashioned a shield to deflect debris. Another guided a comrade across a molten fissure, using gravity lines improvised from the environment. Every action defied Xylan expectations of biology, physics, and psychology. The alien narrators were filled with oscillating awe and terror. Each human reaction to danger revealed adaptability that no Xylan algorithm could model. They endured, but they did more. They adapted, reshaped, and manipulated adversity into advantage. A minor quake revealed a fissure. Humans converted it into a tactical barrier, using the movement of molten rock to funnel predators away from their path. A sudden acid downpour should have burned their skin beyond healing, yet they countered with improvised shelters and chemical coatings derived from ship components.
Hours stretched into an eternity. Fatigue should have crippled them. Fear should have paralyzed them. But humans pressed on with relentless purpose, coordinating movements with silent communication, small gestures, and improvisation. The Xylan watched as a group formed a human chain, one climbing a cliff while others pulled their comrades upward through rain-slick rock, molten stone, and corrosive mist. The predators lunged again, but humans anticipated and countered each attack, blending logic and instinct into actions that seemed to bend the laws of survival themselves. One scout whispered into the comm network, voice trembling, "They are impossible. Every law of nature bends around them." The Elders' sensors registered spikes and biofeedback, pride, fear, awe, and the first seeds of existential doubt. Humanity was no longer a hypothetical anomaly. They were reality, a new apex emerging before the Xylan eyes. By nightfall, the crimson sun dipped behind jagged cliffs, casting elongated shadows across molten livers. The humans paused atop a ridge, exhausted, faces smeared with ash, sweat, and acid. They tended to wounds, shared water, checked each other's injuries, and adjusted improvised armor. Even in fatigue, they were alert, assessing predators, planning the next moves, always thinking, always adapting. The Xylan could not comprehend the combination of willpower, intelligence, and compassion that allowed them to endure. Then, a deep roar echoed from the depths, a sound so primal and intelligent that the Xylan felt it reverberate through their own bones. The apex predator of the Maelstrom Basin emerged, massive and armored, every sinew coiled for the kill. Even the Xylan, masters of their death worlds, paused in trepidation. But the humans did not falter. They exchanged gestures, spread out, and improvised weapons from molten rock, hull debris, and chemical compounds.
One human distracted the creature with a chemical flare, while another climbed to higher ground, launching molten debris with deadly precision. They coordinated instinctively, covering each other, retreating only when necessary, always thinking, always adapting. The battle was tense and cinematic. Sparks flew, molten rivers hissed, acid dripped from every surface, predators lunged and retreated, humans countered and advanced, weaving through chaos like dancers. The Xylan watched in awe and fear. One observer whispered, almost to themselves, "They do not merely survive, they dominate the impossible." By the end of the trial, the predator lay defeated, exhausted, yet the humans remained standing, battered, bloodied, but unbowed. The Xylan hierarchy shuddered, their conception of apex life shattered. Survival was no longer brute strength, it was innovation, will, adaptability, and unbreakable cooperation. The humans regrouped on the ridge, tending wounds, checking supplies, preparing for what lay ahead. The Xylan watched from their spires, hearts, or whatever analog they possessed, tight with awe, disbelief, and the first tremors of respect. Humanity had not only endured, they had rewritten what it meant to thrive on a death world. And far below, in the deep fissures of the Maelstrom Basin, unseen eyes glimmered. Something stirred. The trial was not yet complete. The human's journey had only begun. The Xylan knew instinctively, whatever came next, the galaxy itself might never measure survival the same way again. The Maelstrom Basin yawned below the Xylan spires like an abyssal wound in the planet's flesh. Gravity twisted in impossible eddies, rivers of molten rock ran like liquid fire, and fissures spat radiation in unpredictable bursts. Predators, evolved for singular purpose, death, prowled in swarms, their obsidian eyes glimmering in the molten fog. This was the ultimate trial, designed to annihilate all but the most perfected of Deathworlders. Every Xylan veteran who had dared enter had perished. Every scout, every champion, every soldier of their species had been crushed, torn, or incinerated. And yet, the humans approached. The vessel descended with hesitant grace, its engines flaring against acid winds, its hull rattling under turbulence that would have crushed any Xylan craft. They emerged from the airlock, small and fragile against the basin's scale, yet movements precise, purposeful, coordinated. Their steps struck molten rivers as if walking across solid rock. Sparks hissed under boots, acid sizzled against improvised armor, yet they pressed on, undeterred. The Xylan watched from the spires above, hearts tight with a mixture of pride, fear, and disbelief. Every sensor recorded their progress. Every algorithm struggled to compute outcomes. Humans faced hazards that should have ended them instantly. Gravity wells twisted their frames. Radiation burned exposed skin. Acid hissed against every surface. Predators lunged with jaws and claws designed to tear them apart. Yet every human movement was calculated, adaptive, unpredictable in the best possible sense. Cinematic moments unfolded in relentless succession. A cliff face crumbled beneath one human. They rolled, caught themselves, and improvised a grappling line from ship cables to scale another ledge.
A molten river surged unexpectedly. Another hurled a hull fragment to divert its flow, creating a temporary bridge. Acid rain corroded surfaces and stung flesh, yet they improvised chemical coatings from ship components, enduring burns and fatigue with grim determination. Predators emerged from every fissure. A pack of 6 lunged from shadows, their claws striking sparks against rock. One human twisted, ducked under the attack, grabbed molten debris, and improvised a weapon that drove the creatures back. Another leapt over a fissure as if gravity were subordinate to their will, extended a hand to a comrade, and pulled them across while molten rocks surged below. The Xylan POV alternated between awe and horror. How could such fragile beings withstand the fury of this world? How could their minds adapt faster than the planet itself sought to destroy them? Time stretched. Hours, minutes, and seconds became indistinguishable in the relentless sequence of hazards. Every step was a calculation, a moral choice, a test of endurance. One human discovered a fissure widening beneath them. They shored it up with debris, diverting molten flows, while another warned the team of shifting predator packs. Their coordination, silent, instinctive, precise, defied the Xylan's most advanced algorithms. And then the apex predator emerged, a behemoth of obsidian plates and coiled sinew, its jaws like jagged blades, eyes burning with predatory intelligence. Even the Xylan faltered in recognition. No warrior, no champion could face it and survive. Yet humans did not retreat. They assessed, coordinated, improvised, and advanced. One flared a chemical diversion, another drew molten debris, a third scaled the cliffs to launch projectiles with deadly accuracy. They used the environment itself as a weapon. The battle unfolded with cinematic grandeur. Sparks flew, molten rivers hissed, acid dripped from every surface. Humans dodged and countered, feinted and struck, weaving between hazards with synchronization that appeared almost supernatural. The predator lunged again, jaws snapping, and yet humans improvised, trapped, and turned each assault into an opportunity to advance. The Xylan watched, minds reeling, every instinct and calculation about apex survival shattered before their eyes. Exhaustion, burns, and injuries should have ended them. They were bleeding, singed, bruised, yet they pressed on. Coordination never faltered. Strategy never broke.
Willpower became a tangible force, bending the universe around them. The apex predator fell, not to brute force, but to ingenuity, perseverance, and the unbreakable will of a species that refused annihilation. The humans regrouped on a high ridge, tending injuries, checking equipment, sharing water, and preparing for what lay beyond. The Xylan, observing from above, recorded every action in awe and existential dread. The Maelstrom Basin, a crucible designed to obliterate the strongest life forms, had yielded to these fragile beings. Apex status was no longer about evolution, technology, or environment alone. It was about adaptability, courage, and unyielding determination. But the Maelstrom was not finished. Fissures shifted, molten rivers surged, and a tremor shook the cliffs beneath them. The predator may have fallen, but the basin still breathed, still tested, still waited. Shadows lengthened, uncounted eyes glimmered from hidden fissures, and the Xylan realized that this trial was only the beginning. The elders, silent, observed the humans from their spires, hearts heavy with awe and the faintest tremor of fear. Humanity had not merely survived the unsurvivable, they had transformed it, rewritten the laws of survival, and left the Xylan to confront a possibility long denied. They were no longer the ultimate Deathworlders. As night fell, molten rivers glowed faintly, acid rains hissed, predators roamed in silent anticipation, and the humans prepared to move onward. The wind carried whispers of power, perseverance, and ingenuity. The Xylan watched, recording, trembling, knowing that what they had witnessed would echo through generations. Fragile beings, unbreakable in will, capable of enduring the unimaginable. The Maelstrom Basin, alive and hungry, waited still. But for the first time, the apex predator was not feared. Humans had survived it. And for the Xylan, that realization was terrifying, exhilarating, and humbling all at once. The storm clouds of the Maelstrom Basin had faded into distant mists, molten rivers cooling into glowing veins of hardened rock. Humans, battered and exhausted, stood atop the highest ridge, their silhouettes framed against the blood-red sky. Every movement, every breath, spoke of struggle endured, danger overcome, and unity forged in the crucible of chaos. The Xylan observed from their spires, hearts, or whatever analog they possessed, heavy with awe and disbelief. These fragile creatures had endured the impossible, yet now they displayed something far beyond mere survival.
they displayed care. In the flickering light of distant lava flows, humans tended their wounded. Hands pressed gently against burns, tears streaked faces smudged with ash and blood. Voices murmured in a cadence that conveyed reassurance and empathy. They improvised splints from fractured hull panels, fashioned protective coatings from chemical residues, and shared water and rations without hesitation.
Even amidst exhaustion, coordination remained flawless. One human helped another across a fissure, adjusting a makeshift harness with precise patience, while a third calmed a younger companion trembling from shock. The Xylan, accustomed to the brutal efficiency of apex survival, could scarcely comprehend this combination of resilience and compassion. In their culture, survival was measured in strength, adaptability, and ruthlessness. Mercy and empathy were luxuries of the weak. Yet here, humans embodied both unyielding endurance and moral courage, blending instinct and conscience into acts that redefined the concept of apex life. Cinematic tableaus unfolded across the ridge, a human tending another's burns with careful, deliberate motions, a team coordinating to stabilize a cliff face threatened by aftershocks, the glow of molten rivers reflecting in exhausted yet determined eyes, and above it all, the twin suns casting long shadows that stretched into the horizon. Every motion was a testament to ingenuity, every decision a proof of will, and every shared glance between humans radiating understanding beyond the bounds of spoken language. The Xylan observers whispered among themselves, their calculations failing again. "They survive," one said, voice trembling, "but they do more than endure." Elders recorded every gesture, every improvisation, every instance of human empathy, their minds struggling to comprehend a species that could endure the unimaginable, yet retain moral and emotional depth. Humans moved forward in small waves, checking each other for injuries, improvising temporary shelters against the residual acid rains, and preparing for the next phase of their journey. A younger human faltered near a fissure, exhaustion threatening to claim them. Another placed a hand on their shoulder, whispered encouragement, and together they navigated the hazard safely. The Xylan recorded this quietly, noting the unquantifiable value of cooperation and emotional intelligence as a tool of survival, a factor no Xylan algorithm had ever accounted for. One human noticed the faint glow of predators lurking in distant fissures. Instead of panicking, they assessed the threat calmly, improvising barriers and diversion tactics using rocks, chemical compounds, and hull fragments. The predators tested their resolve, but humans adjusted instantaneously, anticipating movement, improvising defenses, and maintaining cohesion under extreme pressure. The Xylan could not decide whether to marvel or tremble. These were acts of survival beyond instinct, beyond calculation. Night descended, molten rivers casting flickering shadows across the humans as they tended to their fires and wounds. Conversations drifted in low tones, laughter flickering briefly amid murmured reflections, plans for the next day forming in whispers. The alien narrators observed quietly, noting the subtle blend of endurance, ingenuity, and compassion.
Humanity was not merely surviving a death world, it was thriving within it, transforming chaos into opportunity, peril into strategy, and suffering into collective resilience. The Xylan, in their spires, began to feel an unfamiliar tension between awe and introspection. The pride of millennia, the certainty of apex dominance, wavered before the simple truth of human adaptability and moral depth. They recorded not just acts of survival, but acts of culture, storytelling through action, mentorship, cooperation, and ethical choice in circumstances designed for annihilation. These acts, mundane to humans, yet extraordinary to Xylan, redefined what it meant to be extraordinary. One elder whispered to a scribe, "Their strength is not only in body or mind, but in heart. They endure, but they guide, they protect, they care." Others nodded silently, their pride challenged yet enriched. Humanity's presence had sparked something new within Xylan society, the realization that apex status was not measured solely by environmental mastery, but by ingenuity, adaptability, and moral courage. Humans began preparing for departure from the ridge, gathering supplies, tending to injured comrades, and surveying the remaining hazards with unwavering focus. Even as their silhouettes receded into the shadowed paths of the basin, the Xylan remained transfixed, recording every detail. Their presence had left a permanent imprint on the alien psyche, a benchmark of resilience, courage, and ingenuity previously unimagined. In that quiet, suspended moment, the Xylan understood that survival was no longer a matter of brute strength or adaptation alone. The humans had demonstrated that true apex life involved creativity, cooperation, and ethical choice under duress. Every improvised shelter, every coordinated maneuver, every act of compassion had redefined what it meant to endure. And as the humans prepared to leave the Maelstrom Basin behind, the Xylan felt a stirring of inspiration,
a whisper of possibility that their own culture could evolve, that their hierarchy of survival could be challenged and improved. Humans were no longer anomalies, they were phenomena, a living testament to the power of ingenuity, courage, and the indomitable spirit. The twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting elongated shadows across molten rivers, fissures, and jagged cliffs. The humans stood briefly atop the ridge, gazing across the basin, before beginning their descent toward their vessel. The Xylan watched in reverent silence, knowing that what they had witnessed would shape generations. Humanity had not only endured, the humans had triumphed, had inspired, and had irrevocably altered the Xylan perception of what life, survival, and excellence truly meant. The wind carried the faint hiss of distant predators, the lingering glow of molten rivers, and the faint scent of acid rain evaporating into the cooling night. Somewhere deep in the shadows, unseen observers waited, aware that the humans were extraordinary. The Xylan recorded everything, their pride tempered by awe, their hierarchy forever questioned, and their minds and culture forever changed. In the quiet aftermath, one elder finally spoke. "We believed we were the apex. We were wrong." A ripple of acknowledgement passed through the spires, a mixture of humility, fear, and admiration. Humanity's presence had become both a challenge and an inspiration, a revelation that survival was more than dominance. It was ingenuity, courage, and heart. And in that moment, as humans descended from the ridge, the Xylan felt the first spark of something previously unimagined, the aspiration to match, or at least comprehend, the extraordinary nature of these beings who thrived where no other could. The humans departed at dawn, their vessel ascending from the jagged cliffs with a roar that echoed across the Xylan spires. Molten rivers reflected their rising silhouette, fiery streaks tracing the path of beings that had redefined survival itself. The wind carried the acrid scent of acid rain, the lingering hum of predators, and the quiet pulse of a world that had witnessed something extraordinary. The Xylan watched, hearts and minds heavy with awe, as the fragile yet unbreakable creatures disappeared into the nebulae beyond. From the alien vantage, every human action had been a lesson. The careful tending of wounds, the improvisation of tools, the courage in the face of impossible odds, all of it lingered like an imprint on the Xylan psyche. Their calculations, once precise and absolute, faltered in the shadow of human ingenuity. This species, seemingly fragile, had endured what no Xylan could. They had adapted where the environment should have claimed them. They had persevered where predators had reigned, and they had thrived when logic dictated annihilation. Cinematic light spilled over the alien cities as twin suns rose higher, casting elongated shadows of the spires and jagged cliffs. Elders gathered atop observation decks, eyes fixed on the retreating vessel, recording every detail. There was silence, punctuated only by the distant hiss of molten rock and the faraway cries of predators. In that silence, the Xylan felt the weight of a revelation. Humanity was not merely strong, they were transformative. Their presence had altered the hierarchy of life itself, showing that resilience was not a product of environment alone, but of creativity, courage, and indomitable spirit. The youngest scouts, who had witnessed every maneuver of the humans, spoke in hushed tones. "They are impossible," one murmured. "They survive. They endure." The elders nodded, silently acknowledging that apex status was no longer defined solely by brute strength, adaptation, or evolution. Humanity had introduced a new metric: moral courage, ingenuity under pressure, and the relentless will to overcome.
Scenes replayed in the minds of the Xylan, humans crossing molten rivers, improvising weapons, tending their wounded, standing together against predators and elemental fury. Each act, no matter how small, resonated as proof that survival was more than endurance. It was mastery of self, environment, and circumstance, combined with heart and intelligence. The planet itself seemed to sigh in recognition, as though acknowledging the emergence of a new apex force in the galaxy. As the vessel disappeared into the swirling clouds of the nebula, the Xylan lingered, silent, introspective, and transformed. Their spires, once symbols of unchallenged supremacy, now bore witness to a lesson in humility and wonder. In the stillness of dawn, the elders whispered to one another, "We believed we were ultimate. We were wrong." The story of humanity's endurance, their courage, and their moral ingenuity would be recorded in archives, taught to scouts, warriors, and leaders for generations. Humans had not only survived the unsurvivable,
they had reshaped the galaxy's understanding of life and survival. The Xylan, once apex predators of a brutal world, now looked outward with new eyes, inspired and challenged by creatures who transformed chaos into triumph, danger into opportunity, and adversity into enduring spirit. And somewhere in the nebula, the humans pressed forward, unaware of the legacy they had left behind, a civilization forever changed by the reminder that resilience is not only physical, but moral, intellectual, and above all, indomitable. The twin suns rose fully, illuminating Xylan cities, spires, and cliffs alike. In that light, a quiet truth became clear. The apex was no longer absolute, the galaxy was no longer predictable, and humanity had ascended, not through brute strength, but through the unique, unstoppable force of their spirit. The Xylan, standing atop their spires, gazed skyward. Awe, respect, and inspiration coursed through their being. Humanity had left, and yet the mark they left behind would endure forever.